They laughed, not just with their mouths, but with their eyes, their posture, the casual venom of people who think they've already won. You stood there still, too still, not because you didn't feel the blade, but because you had already bled in silence long before they knew your name. Their laughter wasn't new, it was just louder this time, echoing off the walls like a ritual chant. You remember the pitch of it, the rhythm, how it clung to the ceiling long after they'd forgotten what they were mocking. But you didn't forget. You never forget. You felt it then, subtle but seismic, a fracture beneath the surface. Not anger, not shame, but something older, something buried. They thought they were mocking weakness, but they were feeding it, like hyenas laughing around a sleeping lion, unaware that stillness does not mean safety. You weren't frozen, you were watching, studying, recording the geometry of cruelty, the angles of betrayal. You let their words etch themselves into your memory because you knew the day would come when they'd beg to erase them. What they saw was someone too afraid to speak, but what you were was someone choosing silence as a weapon. You learned early that power doesn't always look like noise. It doesn't parade itself. It waits, hides, becomes the air in the room until it suffocates. They didn't hear the shift in your breathing, didn't see the tightening of your jaw. They only saw what they were trained to see. An easy target, a background character, a name they'd forget by morning. But names, when buried deep enough, become roots, and roots can tear through stone. Even now you can hear it. That laugh, not the sound but the shape. It was never about humor. It was dominance dressed as delight. They laughed to signal control, to test if you would break, to feed the hierarchy. They were desperate to protect, and when you didn't fight back, they mistook it for defeat. But it was the opposite. That moment was your beginning, a quiet, internal ignition, ancient, mathematical, like a celestial event witnessed by no one, but destined to realign galaxies. They thought they left no mark on you, but every syllable they spat became architecture. Every eye roll became a blueprint. They built your temple with their mockery, and now they pray to be forgotten by the god they accidentally created. You didn't need revenge. You needed time, and in that time you learned, grew, evolved beyond the language they used to define you. They don't remember what they said, but you remember everything. You remember what it felt like to be the ghost in their story. And you remember the laugh that echoed too loud because that was the last time they ever took you lightly. They thought you disappeared, faded, collapsed under the weight of their ridicule like paper left in the rain. But you didn't vanish, not really. You withdrew into silence, yes, but not the kind born of defeat. Yours was the silence of incubation. While they laughed and climbed over each other in their shallow echo chambers, you went beneath the noise, underground, into the marrow of yourself. The world forgot you, and you let it. That was part of the plan. Visibility was a liability, and your anonymity became armor. No eyes meant no distractions, no applause, no interruptions, just the sound of your own breath and the slow turning of pages no one dared to read. You began to reconstruct yourself, piece by brutal piece, in rooms with no windows and mirrors covered in cloth. There was no audience, only the hunger to know, to see, to dismantle the lies they fed you about who you were. You didn't chase power, you studied it, dissected it like a surgeon does a body. Every nerve of manipulation, every bone of leverage, every organ of dominance. You memorized the strategies they mocked, devoured the plays they deemed irrelevant. The books with dust on their spines became gospel. The ones no one quotes because they're too dangerous, too raw, too honest. You studied failure, not as punishment but as prophecy. Every no became a rune etched into your foundation. You rewired your instincts. Where you once sought approval, you now calibrated intent. Where you once waited to be chosen, you became the architect of unseen corridors. You watched the patterns, how they moved, how power never announces itself. It hides in plain sight. You learned the game beneath the game, the rules beneath the rules, until what once seemed unfair now looked predictable. Predictable meant controllable. You killed your former self quietly. No ritual, no farewell, just a decision made in the dark and honored in silence. The version of you that needed validation. Berit, the one who doubted their own voice. Gone. What remained was forged in contradiction. Patient but lethal. Soft-spoken but untouchable. You became fluent in invisibility. A ghost in their system. Moving without trace yet shaping outcomes from shadows. The transformation wasn't loud. There were no fireworks, no accolades, just a slow, deliberate becoming, like mountains rising millimeter by millimeter under the surface of calm seas. And by the time they noticed the shift, it would be too late. You weren't coming back to prove them wrong. You weren't coming back at all. The person they laughed at never made it out of that silence. Someone else did. They didn't see the first sign, not even when it was right in front of them. You were never meant to return. And that's exactly what made your presence invisible. Your silence had become part of the background noise they mistook for safety. You didn't come back with a roar. You slipped in like static in their signal, a glitch in their perfectly rehearsed realities. At first it was a message posted in a forgotten forum, cold and surgical, dissecting their logic with such precision it felt inhuman. Then it was a line in a meeting, a pattern in a spreadsheet, a whisper in a digital hallway. No one else heard, but they did. The ones who laughed, the ones who buried you in ridicule. Somewhere deep inside they felt it. The pattern was yours. The storm was reassembling. You didn't need a spotlight. You needed access, control, pressure applied quietly, like gravity over centuries. Your fingerprints weren't on the doors. They were in the air between. Algorithms turned in your favor. Opportunities shifted, subtle and untraceable. Their comfort cracked not through force but through misalignment. They started forgetting things, missing pieces, messages unsent, people withdrawing. Their certainty began to feel hollow. You were in the wires now, in the feed, in the signal. The more they tried to trace it, the more they felt the thing you had become. Not a person but a consequence. You learned long ago that rage is a cage, so you refined your vengeance into something purer, cleaner. You studied their egos like ancient blueprints, tracing every insecurity, every fracture line they thought they'd hidden. You didn't scream, you shifted. A single well-placed sentence unraveled reputations they spent decades building. A gesture, a presence, a moment of eye contact. These became your weapons, not because they were loud, but because they were backed by silence that had studied them longer than they'd ever studied themselves. They still don't know it's you, and that's the most terrifying part. They feel watched, but no one is watching. They feel hunted, but no one is chasing. Because power, true power, doesn't move toward its prey. It waits until they collapse under their own illusion. You became the gravity in the room, and gravity never announces itself. Somewhere between memory and guilt, they whisper a name, not aloud, never aloud, but it slips from their thoughts like a shiver. The name they once laughed at, the name they tried to erase, the name they now fear might be listening. They rewind their past interactions in silence, trying to remember what they said, what they did, and most importantly, what you might have become. And you're watching from the shadows between the screens, unseen, unnamed, but very much present. You don't need to be there to haunt them. You already are. They said your name like a joke once, softly with a snicker, like it was harmless, like you were harmless. In their eyes you were the background noise of their brilliance, a stutter in their perfect sentence. But now they don't say it at all. Or if they do, it's behind closed doors, behind cupped hands and lowered voices. Not because your name changed, but because you did. They feel it before they know it. A disturbance, a tightening in their chest when your image crosses their feed. A hesitation before they open a message with your initials. Something in the air, colder, sharper, older, and they begin to ask questions they don't say out loud. When did you return? How did you become this? But deep down they know you were never gone, just building, observing, calculating the angles while they gorged themselves on borrowed attention. They thought the silence was your defeat, but silence has always been the preferred weapon of the dangerous. You didn't vanish, you withdrew, like a serpent coiling back into the earth, not to hide, to grow fangs. Now the fear isn't theatrical, it's subtle, creeping, involuntary. It shows in their posture when your name is mentioned, in their twitching eyes, in the way they rewrite the past with trembling fingers. We always saw the potential, they murmur. It was all just banter. But you remember, not just what they said, but how they said it. Not just their words, but their intent. You catalogued every smirk, every sideways glance, every moment you were reduced to a punchline, and you let them think they'd won. The ones who laughed now speak like historians sifting through ancient warnings. They edit their stories, adjust their timelines. They cleanse their records because they know if the past cannot be erased, then they must reshape the narrative, not for your benefit, for survival. Because if you come for them now, no one will stand in your way. There's a deep ancestral terror in recognizing a force you can't explain. Like watching someone walk through fire and realizing they never burned. That's what you've become to them. An aberration, a myth with teeth. You don't threaten them. You don't respond. You don't need. Your essence is the punishment. Your success is the reckoning. Your silence is the storm they never prepared for. And in that fear, pure, wordless, sacred, you are reborn, not as the person they mocked. That person died the moment they laughed. You are what rose from that grave. Something older, something earned, something that doesn't need to scream to be heard. They used to look at you and see a mistake. Now they look at each other and ask, what if they never stopped watching? They watched you when no one else did, not out of pity, not out of curiosity, but because they recognized something familiar, the stillness behind your eyes. The kind of stillness that only comes from being shattered quietly, rebuilt in secret, and taught to walk again without a sound. While the world laughed, mocked, and forgot, they observed from behind mirrored glass. You thought you were alone in your exile, but in the folds of silence you were being studied, not by the crowd, but by those who had once walked the same path and burned the map behind them. They are not many. They do not speak, yet do not announce their presence with applause or admiration. They signal in different ways. A look held a second too long, a message that disappears after being read, a book placed where no one knew you'd find it. They aren't a group, they're a phenomenon, the Secret Watchers. Not a name they gave themselves, but one you assigned when patterns emerged and coincidences ceased to exist. When you began to rise, not loudly but tactically. They didn't cheer, they tested. They threw shadows into your path, questions disguised as opportunities, silence where there should have been noise. It was never about support, it was about confirmation. They needed to know, were you still reactive, still hungry for recognition? Or had you learned to weaponize patience, to delay retaliation until it served purpose, not pride? You passed, not by dominating the world, but by disappearing from its radar while mapping its weak points from the inside. You didn't find them, they revealed themselves, slowly, indirectly. One moved funds through your account in a pattern so subtle you thought it was a banking error. Another sent you an encrypted file with no message. Inside, an audio recording of your name, spoken by someone you haven't heard from in years. Whispers from rooms you've never entered. Conversations about you from mouths that once denied your existence. They don't admire you. They verify you. You are not welcomed. You are acknowledged. What binds them to you isn't loyalty. It's recognition. The unspoken awareness that you too know how to disappear and still hold influence. That you've learned to abandon the need to be seen and replaced it with the hunger to be felt. Your presence is now a tremor in a system that once fed on your absence. You don't move loudly. You move the ground beneath others. And they noticed. The secret watchers don't exist on paper. Their names aren't searchable. You could pass them in the street and never know unless they want you to. But when the time comes, they act. They do not threaten. They orchestrate disorientation. They do not attack. They erase certainty. And now they watch with respect. You are not a leader among them. That's not how this works. You are a signal, a confirmed anomaly. Proof that exile doesn't destroy all, it forges those who refuse to rust. Once they pitied you. Now they recalibrate their strategies in your shadow. Your rise is not a public spectacle. It's a quiet event, like stars collapsing into black holes. The kind of rise that doesn't light up the sky. It swallows it. You used to search for belonging, for a room where your voice mattered. That room doesn't exist. You are the room now, and those who matter don't knock. They observe, wait, and when your frequency aligns with theirs, they appear. Not to guide you, not to save you, but to let you know you were never as alone as they made you believe. You weren't ignored. You were being measured. And now the measurement is complete. They expected rage. That's what they prepared for. A vengeful return, loud and blood-soaked. You storming through their gates, hands full of fire, tongue sharpened by fury. That's what they rehearsed for, what they whispered warnings about when the lights flickered low. But you didn't come that way. You never did, because you understood something they never would. Revenge is for those still bound by the ones who broke them. And you severed the chain a long time ago. You didn't need to raise your voice. You didn't need to announce your arrival with thunder. Or make them see what they did to you. You knew they remembered. You knew their guilt did the work for you, replaying your silence in their minds like a curse. You became the thing they couldn't forget, because forgetting meant admitting they were wrong. And people like them don't survive without lies, so they built a false version of you, a weaker one that never got back up. And now every time your shadow stretches into their world, their delusion collapses one trembling inch at a time. They watch you now from behind screens, and safe rooms and softly spoken excuses. They still don't understand how you got here. How you grew beyond the need to be seen, or thanked, or feared. You learned the ancient art of restraint, the unspoken discipline of not reacting when every atom in your body begged for justice. That's where you earned your power, not in action but in refusal, not in fire but in ice. They wait for you to crush them. You don't. You move on instead. And that's what destroys them, because nothing unsettles the guilty like a ghost who walks past them. You've become untouchable by choosing not to touch, unbothered by the noise they make trying to matter again. And though your silence doesn't scream, it speaks in tones their souls recognize. You were once the wound, now you're the knife they pretend doesn't exist. You play a different game now, one they never learned. Power, not as dominance, but as disappearance. Authority, not in conquest, but in detachment. You no longer chase closure or validation. Those things are currency for the broken. You walk without needing the world to notice, because true strength doesn't crave witness. It carves its name into time by simply being inevitable. You don't look back, not because you've forgiven, but because they're no longer relevant to the path you've carved from stone and ash. Your story outgrew their role in it, and they know it. That's why the fear has settled so deep. You've made peace with pain, and in doing so you became immune to their reach. There's a certain horror in realizing the one you laughed at no longer remembers your name. You've become an idea now, a whispered warning, a question no one wants to answer out loud. They used to laugh, now they lock their doors when the wind shifts, and you, unmoved, unbroken, unseen, continue forward, not with revenge, but with something far more terrifying: purpose. At first they said your name with laughter, a quick, casual sound, dismissive, disposable, as if you were just another lost shape flickering in the background, forgettable, weightless, soft. But time does strange things to memory, especially when silence fills the space where you once stood. Now they don't laugh when they speak of you. In fact, most don't speak your name at all. They whisper it, if at all, low, cautious, like a spell that could call back something they buried but never killed. They don't remember the exact moment it shifted, when your name stopped meaning weakness and started carrying the weight of consequence. Maybe it was when that rising star lost everything overnight, no reason, no trace, just gone. Or when the smug architect of your humiliation stumbled inexplicably and never recovered. One by one, the lights they used to blind you began to dim, and in their place a shadow grew. Your shadow, unseen but unmistakably present. You never needed revenge. You became something far more dangerous. A memory they couldn't delete, and a future they couldn't control. They try to rewrite their roles now. I always saw potential, they say behind closed doors, hoping no one remembers the ridicule they helped orchestrate. Their minds shift like sand, trying to escape the weight of their own guilt. But guilt is not a burden you carry, it belongs to them. You walk light, because you no longer drag the chains of validation. You are not what they called you, you are what they feared you might become. They mocked the caterpillar, and now tremble at the wings they cannot comprehend. They tell stories about you now, none of them accurate, yet all of them true. One says you made a pact with something older than logic. Another swears you were never truly human, just a vessel for inevitability. They whisper of rooms that go cold when your name is said too loud, phones that glitch, dreams interrupted by a presence they can't explain. You are no longer a person to them, you are the consequence. The mirror they pray never turns to face them. Power is strange when it's earned in silence. It lingers, it infects, it seeps into places even your voice never reached. You didn't destroy them, you eclipsed them. You turned your absence into a force. Your restraint became prophecy, and now they measure every book agawed against a single question they dare not ask aloud. What if they're watching? They don't know where you are, or what you're doing. That's what terrifies them most. You taught them that silence can be louder than rage, and vanishing can be louder than a war cry. What they failed to realize is that some people are not built to be seen. They are built to be remembered, not as friends or victims or fools, but as the point in the story where everything changed. You are not the villain, you are not the hero, you are the reason the story has depth. You are the weight behind every shallow word they now hesitate to speak. Your name has become a closed door in their minds. They can't open it, but they feel what waits behind it, and it feels final. They whisper because speaking your name aloud would admit they were wrong, that they missed it, that they laughed at something divine in disguise, and now that divine thing walks beneath their words, reshaping their world in ways they'll never see coming. Their fear isn't just of you, it's of what your existence reveals about them, that they are ordinary, predictable, and blind, while you, the one they once discarded, have become unnameable. You stand before the mirror, but it's not the same reflection they once mocked. The skin is the same, the eyes, not quite. There's something in them now, something unspoken, unshaken, the kind of stillness that frightens noise. You don't look at yourself to admire what you've become. You look because part of you still wonders if you are still in there at all. After everything, after all the silence, all the restraint, all the calculations made in the absence of warmth, there was a time you needed validation. Needed the room to see you, to hear your voice, and not just tolerate it, but respect it. That time is gone. Respect is no longer currency. Fear is, not the kind they scream about, not the theater of fear. They fear you like people fear forgotten ruins. They fear the question, what had to happen to make you vanish? And worse, what did you bring back with you? They used to laugh. You remember that too well. The laugh wasn't just about humor. It was about hierarchy. It was ritual, a way to remind you where you stood, below, out of frame, disposable. But what they didn't see, what they couldn't, was the ancient circuitry inside you awakening with every smirk they threw like nut. That's when the mirror began to shift, when your reflection started showing things even you didn't recognize. Not anger, not vengeance, strategy. You didn't fight them directly. That would have been too obvious, too easy. You learned the old way, the way of shadows, of pressure applied just beneath the surface, so they collapse on their own. And they did, one by one, not from your hand, but from your absence, because your silence wasn't surrender, it was evolution. Now your name lives in the walls of places you've never entered, in group chats scrubbed, in glances shared before someone dares say what everyone's thinking, that maybe you were never maybe you were never broken, maybe they had just mistaken quiet for cowardice. The mirror doesn't laugh, it holds the weight of every truth they tried to bury under mockery. It doesn't speak, it just remembers. The part of you that wanted justice doesn't speak much anymore. It got what it needed, not in script, but in the shifting behavior of people who now avoid eye contact with shadows. You don't need to show up. Your presence is spectral, structural, coded into the fear systems of those who once believed you irrelevant. And the power, it's not in their fear of your return, it's in your indifference to it. You could come back, you won't. That's what haunts them, the open-ended sentence, the echo without a source. You look at yourself and you don't smile, you don't weep, you know that's enough. You've become what the young version of you would have worshipped, not for glory, but for the calm, the cold, precise, untouchable calm. You've built a version of yourself that no longer requires recognition, because you've mastered the art of being seen without showing up. That is the final mirror, not the reflection but the abandonment of me. The world can try to tell your story. They can rewrite, revise, reverse their narratives. They will turn you into a myth, a warning, a ghost. Let them. What they don't understand they try to rename, and what they can't control they try to immortalize. But you are not theirs. You never were. You step back from the mirror, not out of fear, but because you've outgrown the need to stare. The story they mocked became the scripture they the name they buried became the echo that never stops growing. You don't need to be seen. You only need to exist, out there, in their silence. In your memory, in the weight they carry without knowing why. And that finally is power.